I'm going to demonstrate how I would seam two pieces of garter stitch together. So assuming you have, we'll call this the back side and this the front side, and we're doing a side seam, a lot of customers wonder how to do that with garter stitch. So the first thing I would say is, if you have used a cast on that has a right and a wrong side, you want to be sure that you have the right sides facing, because for garter stitch, in some cases, you know, the right side is the wrong side. They're the same. So, but they may not be depending upon what cast on you use. So first of all, you want to have your pieces right side facing you. So in this case, the cast on that was used does have a right and a wrong side, so I would not want to attach these two pieces because this line would look sloppy at the bottom. So with right sides facing, we'll call this the back side, we'll call this the front side. I've got a wool needle threaded with a contrast yarn. If you were doing this, you should use the same yarn that you knit your pieces in, but I've chosen a contrast here just so that you can see it easily on the video. So I'm going to start by finding my corner stitch on the left hand piece, and you may have to poke around to find this initially, because in this situation the particular yarn that was used for these swatches is a little hairy, so that's one thing. The second reason it's a little bit hard to find is that this cast on was pretty tight, so depending upon what cast on was used and who cast on, some people just cast on tightly, and maybe what the nature of the yarn is, you may have to poke around to find it. But when you find it, you want to be sure you get the exact corner, because that is what will make for a neat join between the two pieces at the bottom. And you don't want to just find one side of the knit stitch. You know how the knit stitch is a V, or it looks like a peace sign? You don't want to grab just one or the other. You don't want to grab just the back or just the front. You want to go through both. So you see how I've picked up both aspects of that corner stitch, and I'm coming through from the bottom or the reverse back side to the top or front side. Now I'm going to leave myself a tail to deal with later. Now I'm going to do the same thing on my other side. Find that corner stitch and go from underside to top. That's the orientation that the needle needs to come through that corner stitch. I want to be sure I've picked the entire stitch up, and I'm going to, this one is kind of messy here. Actually, I didn't have the corner there, so see, here's the corner right there. Okay, so this is going to give me the neatest join. I'm going from the reverse side to the top side, or back to top side, and the right or front, the front piece, the right hand swatch. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to go through the same hole or stitch as I did before. So I've created sort of a figure eight here. I've gone from bottom to top of the left or back side, from bottom to top of the right or front side, and then I've come back bottom to top of my left side. So I have sort of a figure eight here at the bottom, and I'm not going to pull it tightly at this point. But the critical thing is that you've got the right sides of your fabric facing you, and your yarn is coming up to the top, and you've made a nice neat join at the bottom. Now we're going to alternate. We're going to pick up a stitch on the right, a stitch on the left, right, left, or front, back, front, back, front, back. Now, what stitch to pick up? That's the question that most customers who come into the store needing help with this ask. They get confused about which is the appropriate stitch. So first of all, let's look a little more closely at garter stitch for those of you who may be new to knitting. So the first thing is, you'll see that garter stitch is represented by these ridges. Okay, and each ridge, let me stretch it out a little bit so you maybe can see them a bit better. Each ridge represents 2 rows of knitting. And each ridge, when you look at it, is composed of what I call smiles and frowns. Smiles and frowns. So the first row that was knit out of this ridge produced actually produced the frown, and the second row that was knit actually produced the smile. But anyway, the important point is smile, frown, smile, frown. And just because this gauge is a little bit small and the yarn I chose is a little bit hairy, and I thought I'd draw a little visual here in bigger print so that to be sure you understood what I meant by smile and frown, smile and frown. So this here is a ridge. So we have 1 ridge, 2 ridge, 3 ridges. Again, each ridge in garter stitch represents 2 rows of knitting, and each ridge is a series of smiles and frowns, smiles and frowns. So what we are going to do is when you're joining garter stitch, you want to join the frown from the ridge on one side of the fabric. I'm sorry, the smile from the ridge of one side of the fabric to the frown on the other. Smile, frown, smile, frown. So you can see this black represents the path that my blue yarn is going to take, and you can see that I'm alternating from the front to the back, front to back each time, and I'm alternating smile, frown, smile, frown. Okay, so now let me show you on the actual piece here. So I'm coming up out of the left-hand side of my fabric, or the back. So the first stitch I'm going to pick up is going to be on my right-hand swatch here, which represents the front of your garment that you're putting together. Now, when you do this, you want to be sure you're picking up a stitch from that first ridge, okay? And what you want to pick up, you do not want to pick up the very edge stitch, because that can look a little bit sloppy. The edge stitch can be a little bit loose for some knitters. So I'm going to go over one stitch, and the one that I'm picking up, again from this first ridge, is a smile. So I go through the smile. Now I'm going to come back to my back side or left fabric, and I want to pick up in the first ridge, okay, because we want to join the first ridge to the first ridge. We want this to look completely invisible when we're done. So I've picked up the smile here, which means on the first ridge over here I have to pick up the frown, okay? And so the frown, and here on the first step, just because we have two loops down there, I have to kind of pull it apart so you can see it. Here is the frown. Okay, then I'm going to pick up. So now I go back to the front side, and I'm picking up smiles on the front side. I'm going to go up to my second ridge, because we've just finished the first, and I pick up the smile. And now I go to my back, and I look for my second ridge, and I find the frown. I go to the front, and I find now my third ridge, and I find the smile. I go to the back piece, I'm on my third ridge up, and I want to find the frown. Okay, so I've not pulled these tightly because I wanted you to sort of see what I was doing. So here I'm on the fourth ridge now, and I'm looking for the smile. So here's the fourth ridge, and I pick up the smile and pull the yarn through. Now I go to the back side, I find my fourth ridge, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I pick up, and you don't have to count up from the bottom, you can also just look to see where your last join came through. If you pull that down, you can see that you've got to work the ridge right up above it, and on this side I'm looking for the frown. And I pick that up. Now just to show you how neat this looks once you actually tighten it up, and ordinarily if I was really doing this on a garment, obviously first I'd be using the same color yarn, because you will actually see this yarn. Unlike the grafting in stockinette stitch, which I call the mattress stitch, where you don't see the color that you're joining with, in garter stitch you will see it. So you would definitely want to use the same yarn. However, what you'll see once I pull the tension tight on these is, because I'm using a contrast color for the purpose of you being able to see what I did well, you can see my blue, and that's why you really need to use the same color yarn when you're grafting. But hopefully what you can also see is that once you pull the tension on this, when you graft this together, you get a completely uninterrupted row or ridge. Each ridge is completely uninterrupted. So let's take a look at this last one I did at the top. And what you can see is, if we follow from the back right through to the front, we've got smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown. So completely uninterrupted. The same on the row below. Smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown. That ridge looks absolutely continuous. So you would not even know that there was a seam there if you had used the same color thread, of course, or yarn as you had knit with. Except that, of course, on the back side, you can feel a bit of a ridge or a seam, which you would expect. Now, the one way you could minimize this a little bit more than what I demonstrated as, although on the right side here, I said absolutely avoid the edge stitch. So you would definitely on this side want to pick up smiles as opposed to the frowns, because these frowns are really right on the edge, and on this side the frowns are uneven and a little bit loose, so you would not want it to pick that one. On the back side, I was picking this, we were picking smiles on this side and frowns over here. So if I follow up to see what set of frowns I was picking a frown one further stitch over than you might have been able to, than I might have been able to. So I could have picked up this frown. Do you see? There's a frown, smile, and here's the edge-most frown on the back piece. And in this case, on this piece, this frown is near the edge, but it's pretty consistently an even tension, and it's not right on the edge. So I could as easily have chosen this series of frowns as to do my grafting as what I did, which was this series of frowns. Okay, and by choosing this side of frowns, you can actually get a little less bulk in your seam. But that's a little bit harder frown to see because it's close to the edge, so it's a little bit at an angle, and that's why I chose, in showing this, demonstrating this, I chose this other more obvious frown just so that you could get the idea better. But again, if you can find and see that this frown is a valid frown, it's just at a little bit of an angle, it will create a little less bulk for you. Anyway, I hope that helps. It does produce a really nice seam, completely continuous. They look absolutely uninterrupted. And at the bottom here, you get a beautiful, smooth join and edge as well.